Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory Podcast. Today, I am going to do part 2 of the Ted Bundy series, part 2 and final of this series. If you're watching this on YouTube and you enjoy this content shared here, even though it gets demonetized every time you use the name of a serial killer or every time that you share the kind of content that I'm sharing in this podcast, please give it a like on YouTube to let me know that you enjoy this content being shared here. And for those of you who are listening to this on your regular podcast apps, then thank you so much for coming back for part 2. Yesterday we ended this part 1 with the panic among girls. I mentioned that in 1974 Seattle was in high alert. I mean, girls were not going to be following a guy that needed help, or they were not going to be at night alone. They avoided alleys. I mean, you name it, they were taking precautions. So today we're going to talk about his strategy. If you missed part 1, please go back. It's going to be the previous episode if you are listening to this in your podcast app. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, I will have card that it's going to pop on the top of the screen, so you can click on it, or will be in the description box down below. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I hope you join me. My name is Letty. This is the Mystery Theory, and as most humans, I have an opinion and I have thoughts, and I like to share them as I shared cases like this one, that it's very well known, that everyone has, almost everyone in the true crime community has covered it, but I still want to give my spin on things, share with you a little bit of my thoughts and kind of relation of what happened, and a little bit more of Ted himself. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Also, if you are part of the Patreon family, check out Beatriz Mota's case. She's the JonBenet Ramsey of Brazil. A terrible unsolved mystery. Go check it out. It's available on my Patreon page. And if you feel like supporting my channel and you want extra content, well, you're in luck, because I will be sharing a new video next week for Patreon on top of this one that I just shared this week. And I'm trying to catch up because of all those patrons that stayed while I was in my little hiatus deserve more videos. So if you're one of them, thank you so much for being there. Now, the new strategy, okay? So the guy couldn't pose as an injured man who needed help from the ladies, right? That was not going to work because now everyone knew. He even left some victims behind and alive. So the new strategy was going to the beach. Broad daylight. I mean, he came up with the idea of wearing a cast in his right arm. Was it right? Okay, it was in one of his arms, okay? So he would approach girls, asking them to help him attach his boat to the car. Okay, the guy... Okay, wait, as he's telling this to the authorities, as he's confessing to all of this, is he not thinking that we can think and we have also brain? I mean, how is this so much different? I mean, okay, he's going to the beach. It is daylight. I get it. That's different. But he's still using the "I'm injured" thing. Maybe he wasn't wearing a cast. Who knows? Maybe he thought that was a little bit more interesting and a little bit more credible. Now, so he would approach these girls and ask them, you want to come with me? I need to attach my boat to my car. I'm injured. I'm handsome. Pretty sure he didn't say that, but the catch was that when people, the girls would get to the parking lot, the car was not there. So he would say, it's up the street at my parents' house. Well, shocker. Most girls refused. But Janice, Ott, and Denise Nesland were not as lucky as the rest of the girls who understood how dangerous it would be to follow this guy to this house. At 12:30 p.m., 23-year-old Janice Ott offered to help him. He took her to an abandoned house that it was up the street. He raped her and tortured her there for hours. Then he tied her up. Didn't kill her. He tied her up and he left to go get a new victim. This guy was bananas. I mean, he was bold. It took him like the entire morning to get this girl to go with him, and now he decides to tie her to the chair so he could go get another one. Well, he did find another one, and he came back with Denise Nesland. Something is up with my tongue today. Who he raped as Janice watched, and then he strangled them both. Their bodies were dumped at the Lake Sammamish State Park nearby, where he dumped Linda Ann Healy, Brenda Ball, and Susan Rancourt. Remember, we talked about these victims in part 1. By this point, you'd think that the police had a few leads, right? And these girls were vanishing. I'm making all kind of weird noises with my elbows on the table. So if you hear something, it's me being weird. I talk with my hands when when something doesn't make sense in my head. But okay, so the police had a few leads. But at this point, they had girls that were disappearing. Somebody was taking them. That's all they knew. But then they learned about his name, because he actually gave the victims his real name. I mean, this guy, the amount of nerve that he had, it was unbelievable. But again, it kind of goes back to that psychology thing that if you say something true while you're lying, it makes it more credible to your brain, and also you can portray that way to the person that you're talking to. Gosh, I mean, not a smart move, but I guess it made sense in his head. Now, you would think that with the many victims that he left behind, girls that run from this guy, and so many of them, they would have a sketch. But they tried. I mean, they tried. But there was not they couldn't come up with a sketch that everyone would be like, oh, that's a guy, When you ask him what he looked like, most girls, the first thing they said, you know it. Say it. He was handsome. Gosh, people. I mean, I am not into details. I can walk up to somebody, have a full-on conversation, and don't know what they're wearing. If they're wearing a dress or a pants. I mean, I am super bad at noticing things. People change their hair color and I don't notice it because I don't care. Honestly, it's not that I'm trying to be mean. If you like your hair purple, please dye it. If you lost weight, good for you, but I'm not into the outside looking of people, if you know what I mean. If I'm having a conversation with you, I'm going to listen to what you're saying, and I'm going to use my brain to answer to what you're asking me or telling me. But I don't, but that is in a normal setting. However, if somebody is asking me something and then I go with this guy to helping put these books in the car, and then all of a sudden I realize that there's something sketchy and I run, you better believe that I know what he looks like. Oh, I do know what he looks like. I will tell you if he brushes teeth, if it's stunk, or you know what I mean. Those are the kind of things that stick to me. If I'm in a situation where I'm feeling worried, or if I'm feeling unsafe, or if I'm feeling like something is not right, my radar is telling me, oh, there's something really wrong here, then you better believe that I will tell you exactly how this guy looks like. I will. For whatever reason, these girls didn't know what he looked like. They couldn't all agree in one sketch. They describe him as handsome. Okay. Fair enough. And to be honest, each victim, for whatever reason, would describe like the nose differently, or the eyes more separate or more put together. You doggy, you better not. Thank you. So, he doesn't listen. It's a really old puppy. Okay. Then Elizabeth, Ted's girlfriend. Remember Elizabeth? Yeah, she's kind of in the background, laying low at this point. But she said that she saw the sketches. I mean, you would think that that's a sketch of your boyfriend. If it kind of looked like him, you'd be like, oh gosh, my boyfriend's kind of sketchy. And now I see this. Maybe I'll look into it. No. Then they said, and she knew all this, okay? She saw the sketch that they finally came up with. Then she realized that it looked like her boyfriend, that he drove a VW like her boyfriend, and that his name was Ted like her boyfriend. I'm like, well, okay. Okay. Listen, Elizabeth. Come on. Really? But instead of taking it seriously, she joked around. She was like, Teddy. That can't be Teddy. And I get it. Maybe that the Ted that she knew was a diplomatic, amazing, serious guy. That you would never think they would be capable of doing something like that. But listen. Don't. I mean, really. If it walks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. Okay? You just do your research, do something. I mean, this, and I'm not making fun of her. I'm just saying that I can't, and my brain cannot understand her words. And I knew that he looked like Ted, my boyfriend. I knew that the name matched. I knew that the same vehicle, but I honestly didn't believe that could be my boyfriend. That part, it doesn't go in my brain. But Ted had different plans, okay? He was moving to Utah and to attend the U of U, which is the University of Utah, for law school. And he said goodbye to Elizabeth. No, you were a good girlfriend. I promise I'll come back. And she stayed behind. And then when she stayed behind, it's when she started to come up with lots of doubts, okay? Well, shocker. Elizabeth, she just started to put together the pieces, okay? Because for the last year, a few things seemed to not to be right. And like, why is a perfectly healthy man keeping crutches and a plaster? I mean, why? Unless he works on TV, he goes to theater lessons, acting lessons. He's a stuntman. I don't know, but he kept that around. He also had a fake mustache. Okay, weird, right? I would be weirded out if I find a fake mustache in my husband's drawer. Totally weird. But to make things worse, a metal cleaver. Okay, that's where I draw the line. I'm like, no, right? She also said that while they were living together throughout the last year, she found some things to be weird. Okay, like he would leave in the middle of the night and he would not tell her where he was going. Well, if he was leaving in the middle of the night, I assumed that he wasn't going to wake her up to tell her, but he wouldn't tell her ahead of time, I'm gonna leave in the middle of the night. Now, he also got a sexy book, okay? That made their love life, well, a living hell for poor Elizabeth. I mean, it was kind of a rough play, including choking and near-death experiences for pleasure. You do you. I don't care what... I've said this multiple times. I do not like to talk about that with my friends. I do not like to talk about that with my family. I most definitely will not talk about it here on public platform. I think that what you do with your sex life, it's your business. You do you, as long as you're doing it in a way that it's not hurting anybody, or I'm not judging their sex life. I don't care what they did, but she mentioned herself that it was kind of rough for her, so maybe she wasn't the one into it. Then she also mentioned lastly that one night she woke up and found creepy Ted, which takes me back to when he was 3, kind of staring at the ant. Okay, but in this case he was got it together, with a flashlight under the covers, studying her naked body. I'm like, okay, not cute, Ted. That's creepy as heck. But she didn't think anything of it. She was putting all of this together after he left, okay? In the meantime, Ted was new state, new life, or new victims, I should say. When he arrived to Utah, he continued to do the same. Stalk girls, he even tried with a house that a few girls shared. I think this was in the downtown area. I lived in Salt Lake City for about 20 years, and I heard the stories over and over again. They all change a little bit to make it a little bit more creepy. Hey, you don't have to change it. Ted Bundy was creepy enough. Believe me, I know, I get it. But I heard this story. I think this was a house in the downtown area. Okay, in the downtown area of Salt Lake City is the super old. Most of the houses in the area are super old. They're super expensive, but they have those older style, rich people houses with a bunch of windows. In this particular had huge windows that they left with no curtains, which I don't know. I wouldn't do, but I guess they didn't care. And then this house was shared by a bunch of girls, okay? And after a while, they noticed him. They started to see this guy in the same spot looking into the house. Now, I swear that I know that this was gonna get me. When they told me, okay, I need to stop laughing right now. But because it's creepy, okay? But I'm glad that the girls are okay, okay? Okay, that's a spoiler. But so the girls spot him. Okay, I need to be serious about that. The girls spot him in this particular place outside their window, looking inside. And then one day they go outside. I'm assuming when the guy left, I don't think, that he was out and he ended up running from them. But he decided to poop in that spot where he was standing. I mean, what the heck? What the heck? Um, that was a creepy situation. I'm glad that those girls were not victims. And I don't understand the whole thing, the poop thing. I don't understand what he was trying to do with that. Maybe he didn't mean it as something like, I'm gonna creep them out by pooping. What the heck, you know? Maybe he didn't mean it like that, but maybe he just had the urge and he did it and left. I don't know. Who's gonna say that they understand what this guy did? Nobody. So, anyways, before his first semester at the University of Utah was over, he had already killed 5 girls. Okay. Yeah, it's and let me tell you about his victims. I'll talk about them. But later on, he even said that he liked to apply makeup and do their hair, and that if you did that, you can make them into whatever you want. Those were his words. He said that to the police later on when he was caught. So, just so you know, he was taking these victims and he was doing the makeup and hair. Yeah. Now, the one that got away, because this Carol Durand, she was super smart. And I don't know if I would have been, if I was in her situation, if I've done the same thing. Let me tell you, she got picked up when he tried to impersonate a police officer at the mall. So he put her in his car. By the way, I'm assuming he wasn't driving any kind of police car, but okay, maybe a particular cop. I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But he gets far enough to put her in the car, and as they start to drive, she notices that instead of going to the police station, they're going the opposite direction, which, by the way, I lived 20 years in the area and I knew one police station. I don't know where the rest ones are, and there's a bunch of them. So kudos to her for knowing where she was supposed to go. Maybe she's been there before, or she had been. Oh gosh, I need to stop it. Now, she realizes that, so she tried to open the door and jump. Then they had a little struggle. He stopped the car, and tried to catch her and put her inside the car again. But when he was going to hit her in the head to hopefully knock her unconscious, she hit him in the groin and ran as fast as she could. So that's how she got away. So that was infuriating, and he needed to go back at it immediately. After this failed attempt, he decided to go out to the Bountiful area, which is north of Salt Lake City. It's in Salt Lake City, North Salt Lake, and then it's the Bountiful area. It's all kind of connected by Redwood Road. I mean, you can go from Salt Lake City to the Bountiful area, or you can take the freeway, whatever. It's not too far away. But he wasn't going there before, and he decided to go to a school play. Okay, creepy as heck. And he tried to, out of everyone there, he tried to lure the teacher to his car, but she refused twice. I mean, she's a busy teacher. I'm sure she was super nice, but goodness gracious, I'm so glad she didn't go. So he found another victim, sadly, and her name is Deborah Kent. And he was super sloppy with her. And when he put her inside his car, he dropped a key. And not any key. That was the key that would open the handcuff that police got on Carol Durand, the girl that got away. Now the police knew it was the same guy, and he was looking for young girls. But back in the day, the news were not what they are today. That whatever happens, in New York, you you know it by the end of the day, or as it's happening in California, or it really is completely different. But back in the day, didn't make into national news. However, Elizabeth, remember Ted's girlfriend Elizabeth, the one that was with doubts now, the one that was wondering if the killer Ted was her Ted, the one that drove that had the same car that her boyfriend had, and that looked like that guy in the sketch. Well, she had a friend, a really good friend, and her name was Lynn Banks. Lynn was creeped out by Ted. You know how that happens? There are these horrible people, serial killers, that will charm their way into everyone but that person. There's always somebody that can't really, there's something off. Well, that was Elizabeth's friend, Lynn. And she never liked Ted. And she did see all the similarities with the serial killer on the loose, the name, the car, the sketch. And she didn't laugh when Elizabeth was kind of laughing about the situation and similarities. She was kind of scared. And she happened to live in Washington, but she had family in Utah. So when she went to visit Utah, it was at the same time that Ted was in Utah. She saw a sketch of the guy who was getting girls in Utah, and she immediately noticed the resemblance. It was definitely Ted, so she decided to go to the Utah authorities and say, hey, this is my friend's boyfriend in Washington. They're looking for this guy too. I'm sure it's the same one. She also alerted the Washington authorities that he was in Utah. But they didn't see it at first. Eventually, they decided to compare notes between Washington and Utah, and they realized, boop, it's the same guy. By then, he had killed 7 more girls. So he got arrested. It was on August 16th. What's today? Today is August 13th. Great. So it was on August 16th, 1975, that Ted was not having a particularly good day. So he decided to drive like a maniac, and it was described as recklessly driving in the Granger, Utah area, which I think Granger is west of Salt Lake City. It's towards Tooele. I think that's where Granger is. Don't quote me on that. But he gets pulled over, right? Because that's what police... And again, I don't know back in the day, but I know that in Utah, there's a bunch of highway patrol. There's a bunch of police. You can't get away with it, okay? If you want to speed, you speed all you want. You won't get caught the first week, the second week, but you will get caught eventually. They're everywhere. They have eyes everywhere. I assure you. And I have no tickets. Okay, knock on wood. I have no tickets. But I know a few people in my family that, they don't look. And sometimes they go a little bit too fast. So they're there. They will find you. I promise you. So Ted is one of them. He gets caught by this police officer. And they always ask you this. I'm sure this is like a routine question that you get, that you have to ask. Maybe they teach you this in the police academy. If you've been through it, let me know. But I get it every single time. I get pulled over, and I got pulled over quite a few times for different things like lights and stuff. Never got a ticket, but got pulled over. And they always ask me, what were you doing, or where are you heading, or kind of casually making conversation. Well, in this case, Ted said that he went to a drive-in movie theater, and the officer was like, what did you watch? And he said, The Towering Inferno. Okay, Ted. No. The officer knew that wasn't the truth because there were no showing of that movie that night. So he was like, why is this guy lying? So after he lied that first time, he asked him to step out of the vehicle and decides to check his trunk, where he finds, okay, this guy was in for more than he bargained for. I mean, he had a ski mask, he had wire, an ice pick, rope, handcuffs, and the infamous tire iron that he was using on his victims. I'm even surprised that there was no blood or anything that, kind of pointed to that, because he was not one of the most meticulous serial killers. But he also found flashlights, gloves, and a pantyhose mask. Oh, okay, for goodness sake, what are we doing? So he got arrested for reckless driving and possession of burglary tools. Well, at least something, right? You have to understand that sometimes they get charged with the smaller charges because they know that they're doing something that they shouldn't be, but they have to get proof before they can accuse him of that. With the reckless driving and the possession of burglary tools, they had enough to keep him. Now things started to pile up for Ted. He was also connected to the kidnapping of Carol Larange, okay? Again, as I mentioned, you get arrested for one thing, but if they suspect that you're into more, they will try to find it as you are there. And he was charged with aggravated kidnapping later on. But then the police remembered the friend who said that her friend's boyfriend involvement in the whole thing, and she believed that he was responsible for the killing spree in Utah and also in Washington. So the police at that point decided, as we have him in custody, let's bring Elizabeth, the girlfriend, which is, again, the same guy that we pull over, the same creepy guy who is carrying a mask, the same guy that has what they call burglary tools. Okay, so let's bring the girlfriend because it matches that same guy. And they questioned her, and really she couldn't tell you once. Every time there was a murder that night, Ted wasn't accounted for. But there was something else that I didn't cover, and I kind of need to mention it because it kind of connects everything in this case. He also had a little something in Colorado. Earlier that year, he went to Aspen. Remember, he loved skiing, and he kidnapped Karen Campbell. I mean, poor lady. She was staying in the same hotel as he was staying, and she disappeared when she went back up to her room as she was leaving. I mean, goodness gracious, this is like, ugh. She was going up to her room to get a magazine that she left behind. She was leaving the hotel. She said, kids, you stay here, or husband, stay here. I'm going to go get the magazine. She never came back. And the rest is history. Now, how did the police connect this to Ted? Well, when they got his car, I had to stop the podcast for a second. I couldn't contain myself from coughing. I guess I've been talking too much without drinking water. But that's why probably my voice is kind of different now. But anyways, how did they connect this? Well, he had one strand of hair in his car, her hair in his car. And that's all they could find. But they were like, okay, this girl disappeared, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we'll charge him with that too. But at this point, Ted, he had 1 year of law school, okay? Which equals a lawyer, right? 1 year of law school equals a lawyer. He decides to represent himself. I don't know if he was a little cocky or if he a little narcissistic. I don't know, but he decides to represent himself. Or if the ultimate motive is what's going to happen now. He had the murder charges because of that, they were going to go for the death penalty. So he said, I need extra time to do research, and he had unlimited use to the county law library. Goodness gracious, who? No, he doesn't. Okay, he did, but it doesn't make sense in my head. Before they were going to try to pursue the death penalty, though, that's what he did. He wanted to go to the library for research. So he was wearing his court clothes, and while he was at the library, he decided to jump 25 feet down from the second floor of the library and walk away by blending in with his court clothes with the crowd that was outside. As you can probably imagine, he didn't have that much time, and he had to hide. He decided to go to the outskirts of Aspen and stay in unoccupied homes in the area. He knew where the police was looking and investigating because, remember, he was his own lawyer, so he had a map that he had access to, and he actually remembered that exact location. But eventually he was exhausted, and he decided to steal a vehicle. Eventually he was so weak that he couldn't even drive. And instead of stopping, he decided to continue, and he was eventually pulled over on suspicious of drunk driving. I mean, what are the odds, right? He was back in jail immediately, but he knew he wasn't going to just take it. The plan worked, though. I mean, he started to come up with a plan, and he was persistent. I'll give him that. And he somehow got a hold of a hacksaw that somebody smuggled in, and he decided to cut a 12 by 12 hole in his cell ceiling. Now, how was he able to hide that hole? I have no idea. I mean, you would think that people would notice it, right? Well, that's why in South America, prisons are made of, actual bricks, because there's no way that you'll cut it with a saw. But back in the day here, things were different. And he actually took the time in the morning to work in his little tunnel, okay? And he didn't have to work much. I mean, he only had, according to what I read, he only had to come up with a hole, and then basically there was some way that he could crawl and go to different places. Now, he actually wanted, there was two reasons why he wasn't going out for breakfast. Number one, he wanted to lose weight to fit into that tiny, a 12 by 12, it is small, especially for a guy. It's a tiny hole. And number two, he wanted the guards to know that he wasn't going to go, so they wouldn't check on him until lunch. So by the time that he decides to, I'm going to get out of here, he would do it in the middle of the night and then have a head start until noon when they checked on him. Pretty good plan, right? So, again, he actually started to explore where this was leading 2 weeks before his escape. But the day that he escaped, he went around through that hole to find an exit. He found one above the jailer's apartment while the guy was having dinner with his wife. He was crawling on top of it. I even saw several people making jokes as, what they could have thought that was. Because, you have to hear it. There's no way that they didn't hear anything as they were having dinner. A man crawling on top of the ceiling. Yeah, not sure about that. But he waited until they went to bed one night. Okay, creepy as heck. he waited until they went to bed one night and got down through the closet. Went through the closet. I mean, that's the exit that he could find. And he walked out the door. So you mean to tell me that the jailer didn't wake up? The wife didn't wake up, and he was able to exit. Gosh, it seems like everything it's falling into place for this guy. He stole a car, but wasn't good enough for the snow, so he, well, hold on. He gets out of there and he steals this car, okay? But you have to understand that, snow and really the car that he got was not good enough. So he ended up getting a ride by saying to this person that his wife was in labor in Denver, so he was dropped at the bus station. So he bought a ticket. Now you're probably wondering, how did he get out, get money, bought a ticket? While he was in jail, he was given a credit card to make long distance calls. Remember that he was representing himself. So he used that credit card to buy a ticket to Denver. But then he caught a taxi, which I have no idea how he paid for. I'm assuming he had to do something to get money, and went to the airport. I'm assuming he didn't use the credit card and was trying to lead the police away from him by buying that ticket that went to Denver with a credit card. He went to the airport. He caught a plane. He went to Chicago. He was finally free. Now, how did he get so far? Well, it took the authorities 17 hours to find out that he was missing from his cell. And so they had no idea that he was in Chicago, and by then he decided, new life, new me. No more stealing, no more raping, and no more murders, Teddy. He also didn't want to stay in Chicago, so he decided to move to Florida. He's been to Florida, he loved Florida, and ended up deciding to go to Tallahassee. He was a different person, a different name. But it was not easy because it was hard for him to find a job. He had no references, nothing. He was a grown man with no work experience, apparently, at least in papers. So he went back to his old ways. He stole a bike, a TV, a racquetball set, wallets, cars. And by then he started peeping again. On January 14th, 1978, he was drinking in a popular, I'm assuming it's kind of a nightclub, maybe bar. And the name was Sheridan's. And this place happened to be, it happened to be by the Chi Omega sorority house. So Ted got drunk, and around 2:45 a.m. he broke into the sorority house. He went to the room of the first victim, Lisa, and she was sleeping. He knocked her out. He was so into it that he decided to bite her. He ripped off one of her nipples, and he's sinking teeth into her butt was so wild that he left an identifiable mark or print in the body. That is wild. So after that, he continued to other rooms to get more girls, 3 more girls. And out of those 3, 2 would survive. The one that didn't was Margaret Bowman. He was brutal with her. I'm losing my voice. But bear with me. He choked her so badly, and I'm talking about Margaret Bowman. he choked her so badly with a nylon stocking that he reshaped her. Gosh. And then struck her so hard in the head that her skull shattered. And you would think that he took all night to do this. No, it only took 15 minutes, but it was brutal. He didn't need much time. And sadly, he was still not done. 8 blocks away from there, he went at it again, but the victim also survived as the other 2 sorority sisters. She had serious consequences, and her dreams of being a ballerina were shattered. But she was alive. According to Ted, at this point the entity was back, right? And he required one more sacrifice. So he did this terrible thing. On February 9th, he drove to Lake City, Florida, and did something, again, a whole lot different. He picked up a girl, a 12-year-old girl by the name of Kimberly Leach. And instead of luring her, like he used to with other girls, he actually forced her into a stolen van that he was driving, picked her up from middle school parking lot, and then he drove 35 miles to an abandoned pig shed where he stabbed her to death. Different MO, same guy. However, when they found her, they knew that this was somehow connected to the Tallahassee murders. Now you're probably thinking, he left Tallahassee, right? Well, he had to, not because he wanted to, or he thought it would be the smart thing to do, but he actually didn't have enough money to pay his rent, so he was evicted. I know. So on February 12th, he left. He stole a VW, of course, because, hey, they're looking for a guy like him who used to drive a VW, so almost like wanting to get caught. If you ask me, of course, this is not something he said, but it just rubs me the wrong way when they do this kind of thing and they think that they're gonna get away with it. So 2 days later, this car was spotted in Pensacola, and this was by a police officer. Spotted by a police officer. So he was a little bit sketchy, and the car was pulling out of an alleyway behind a restaurant that had been closed for hours. So the officer checked the plates. It's a stolen vehicle. He tried to pull him over. Ted decided to run for about a mile, and then he stopped. The officer thought that he was going to surrender, and when the officer was putting the first handcuff on him, Ted kicks him and takes off. The officer quickly grabbed his gun and fired a warning shot. So Ted stopped, but really put up a fight, wanting to take the gun from the officer. I mean, this guy was incredibly lucky. This happened a long time ago, and I'm sure the police officer was following protocol, and kudos to him. But I went through this several times as I was doing research, and I can't help but have like those movie fights where the officer is fighting the criminal and, fighting for the gun. And I mean, he could have, used his gun and maybe not kill him, but incapacitate him by putting, in the leg or arm, or I don't know. But I mean, the officer had to really fight and be overpower. Had to overpower Ted. Gosh, get it together. So now, 5 years later, 5 years of killing, 4 different states, and Ted knew that now it was over. But he decided to be his own attorney again. He chose to represent himself one more time, this time for the Omega Chi girls. He even denied a pre-trial, which would give him the possibility of avoiding the death penalty. People believe that he thought that he was going to win and he didn't need that. Or maybe he didn't and that's what he really wanted. Who knows? With this guy, you don't know what he really wanted. His trial was broadcasted and people were watching from their houses, and later on they said that he seemed so confident, so calm, almost innocent, some people would say. But one of the things that really made a difference was when he called one of the officers, one of the first officers to arrive at the house, and asked him to describe in detail what he saw, how the victims were, how they were killed. I mean, gruesome details that you don't want the jury to know that you're capable of all that. And by the time that the officer gave all the details, he said that he didn't have any questions. In my humble opinion, it was almost like he wanted to relive that moment one more time. It doesn't really make sense that he needed to know all those details, that he wanted to share those details with the jury when really that was not going to help him. 7 hours later, he was found guilty of all charges. He kept saying that he was innocent, and he said that he didn't even want to plead for his life because he was an innocent man and they were making a mistake. After that, he had the trial for Kimberly Leach, and he was sentenced to the electric chair. He appealed, but then he confessed and even was asked to help the FBI to catch the Green River Killer. 11 years later, he was in the electric chair. And after the fact, people outside celebrated his death. Some people were interviewed and said that they were hoping that he would rot in hell. And that ended his story. I can't help but try to understand a little bit of what he was trying to make us believe out of everything that he said in those confessions. Why would he go out of his way to share those confessions, knowing that they were not going to really help him? He knew what was going to happen, but it's almost like he was trying to paint himself in another way. Not the way that most people see him or saw him at the time, but by victimizing himself and trying to look innocent, trying to look like life happened to him. He didn't do anything to deserve it. One of the first things I've noticed without anybody pointing that out was the fact that he always continued to say how different things were affecting him. Oh, that was the end, so I started drinking. Oh no, that happened to me, so I had to do this. Oh well, I wasn't looking for girls. It was the entity that was looking for girls. I only was covering it up because I didn't want to go to jail. For somebody with a degree in psychology, you would think that if you're going through something like that, you'd see the signals of needing help. So even though he went out of his way to kind of make himself into the victim in a lot of instances, I can't help but think that he did it only because he wanted to find an excuse for everything that he did. And I'm not saying that people going through hard situations are not, you know, me. I don't even know how to put this, but I understand that if you had a rough childhood, maybe if you were born out of incest, like some people believe that he was. I understand that if you were exposed to a violent father, grandfather figure, that maybe you'd have those I totally get it. But I also believe that unless you have a mental illness that incapacitates you, you're able to be different from your grandparents, from your mom, from that bad influence in your life. You are able to, unless you have a mental illness. And he played that card for a little bit, which makes me super mad because there's so many people with real mental illness in this world that commit crimes, but there's also so many people that go through the same thing and are the most amazing people that you'll ever meet in your life. That the guy had some kind of a mental illness, sure he did. But I also believe that when mental illness, it's kind of mixed with very intelligent people. Sometimes that's the horrible combination that we find in this kind of cases for serial killers. It's kind of a combination of two things that make them into what they are. Not make them do what they do, but make them into what they are. Into what they are. I really have no sympathy for it though. I understand mental illness. I've touched on that several times. I have several of you message me and even leave me in the comments the kind of things that you are dealing with. And so I have so much respect for mental illness, but I so much hate it when people use it to excuse their behaviors. It bothers me a lot. And even though I cannot sit here and say, well, he was not this or he was not that, he was only a psychopath. You know, I cannot sit here and diagnose him. But it bothers me that they use that excuse. They use that as an excuse. Because it's not, but they use it as an excuse because they're smart enough to know that there's a slim possibility that they can fake it. And thinking about the span of 5 years that he got to do whatever he wanted, really, and the way that he portrayed himself and the way that he was able to get these girls. I mean, I don't care if he truly believed about that entity. I don't care about that. I just think that he was extremely smart and he knew what to say to get away what he wanted. That's why he convinced Elizabeth that she was lucky to have him as a boyfriend, even though he was not the perfect boyfriend. He was borderline abusive. Well, not even borderline. He was abusive. So such a horrible case, such a feeling of, somebody should have done something. But at the same time, we're talking about different times. We're talking about different technology, different things that were not available back then that we have today. Like the fact that he was using his own car and nobody was able to get a license plate. And like the fact that they couldn't agree on a description of the same guy. I mean, it's piling up all the things that he was able to get away with just because police didn't have enough on him. It's absolutely unbelievable. And the chances of you getting away with a lot more stuff are higher if you're handsome. I mean, I read this, I shared this with you guys several times. I even have a podcast that talks about how serial killers look, and look it up. It's somewhere there. It's one of the first episodes. Kind of went in depth and all that. But it's so sad to know that he got away with a bunch of stuff, and that part of it was his looks that made people feel safe around him, even though they were not. Such a terrible story, but I think it should teach us something. And you can see their faces. They can look harmless, but you don't know. So you better treat every circumstances with very carefully. And I am not saying be rude, but I want to finish this podcast by saying it's okay to be rude if you are a woman. We are taught to be polite. We are taught to answer questions. We're taught to be what a woman is supposed to be. But sometimes, because we're taught that, we get into situations that could have been avoided by saying no. I'm sorry, I can't. Oh, I'm in a hurry. Sometimes following the politeness that is expected of women really plays a role in this kind of situation. Saying no would never be rude. It's just a boundary. It's just you saying, I am here, but you stay there. And I think it's something that if I could teach something, that one thing to my daughter, that one thing to younger girls is it's okay to say no. No, it's a boundary, and you should have those. Recently, I was reading this article of this serial rapist that is in Salt Lake City, and right now they're looking for him. And how he was getting his victims, and again, the politeness, the right thing to do. Be kind, be sweet, be polite. And how sometimes those factors, and again, I understand, I get it. But we have to learn to say no in a polite way. So, can you please help me carry these books to my car, because I'm in a hurry right now. I wish I could. I'm sure, and you can point out to an officer, a guy, a crowd. Let me ask them and see if they can help you with that. Can you help me put this here or there? I'm sorry, I can't. I'll find somebody else who can help you. You know, that's the kind of thing. Protect yourself. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware who is around you. And if you're in a situation when somebody wants something from you that you're going to help, and there's nobody around, that's one more reason to say no. I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go. I'm sorry. That's it. That can make a difference in a situation where you think you have under control, but you could be overpowered and you could be putting yourself in harm's way for not being able to say no. It's one of those things that living in a big city and being surrounded by news around crime taught me it's okay to not be saying yes. Yes, I'll help you. Yes, I'll no. I learned my lesson, and I hope that everyone that is listening to this can understand. You don't have to be rude. I hope that helps you in whatever way. And really, we can teach this to our girls, the younger generation, the teenagers of today. When I say younger generations, I feel like I'm 100 years old and I'm only 37. But I wish we can teach that to them too. That it is okay to be polite and still say no. Thank you so much for being here at the Mystery Theory podcast. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, let me know what you think about this case in the comments down below. I swear that my neighbor does that to that pond every single time. I'm glad this podcast is over. Thank you again for being here. Make sure that you check my YouTube channel and that you leave a rating in the podcast, whatever platform that you're listening to. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Yeah. My neighbor. Yeah. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.